Ah, they dragged you by the spine and threw you to hell, thinking the fire would feast on your soul, that the smoke would blind you, that the screams would teach you submission, but you didn't scream. No, you listened. You learned the language of demons, memorized the scent of betrayal, and carved your name into the walls of the abyss with broken fingernails and vengeance. They wanted you silent. Instead, you became fluent in war. You see, when they send someone like you to hell, they forget. You don't beg for heaven. You build your kingdom beneath the ashes. They thought they were punishing you, but they were preparing you, sharpening your edges, melting your mercy, starving your faith until the only thing left inside you was fire that answered to no God. They called it a lesson. They called it justice. But justice is just a mask they wear when they're too scared to admit they're predators. And you were the prey that refused to die. The kind of prey that crawls out of the hunter's gut, reborn. They stripped your name, mocked your scars, spit in your silence, thinking they'd buried you. But you were the seed, and hell was just the soil. The darkness didn't break you, it fed you. You learned the rhythm of pain, how it pulses in patterns, how it becomes a metronome for your rise. You didn't just survive the fall, you made the fall your fortress. And when they slept, convinced you were gone, you trained. With every breath like broken glass, you trained. With every lie they told in your absence, you trained. With every fake condolence, every pitiful whisper, you trained. And when the gates of hell finally split, you weren't crawling. You were marching. They never expected you to return. That was their first mistake. They thought they had time, thought distance diluted memory. But memory doesn't fade when it's stitched with betrayal. It festers. It evolves. It becomes something monstrous, something holy. You were down there collecting names, weren't you? Watching them from the pit, their smiles, their games, their comfort, all while you bled beneath the weight of silence. But you didn't stay alone. No, you whispered, and the broken heard you. The abandoned heard you. The damned looked up and saw not a prisoner, but a warrior. They followed your pain like a hymn. You didn't just come back. You brought the forgotten with you. You returned with an army of angels, not the kind painted in churches. No, the kind with cracked halos and dirt beneath their nails. The kind that don't sing hymns. They scream justice. Now they don't know what to do with you. The same ones who sentenced you now stutter your name like a curse, because you're not just a man anymore. You're a mirror. You show them their rot, their hypocrisy, their rules, which only apply to the weak. They built a world where monsters wear suits, where pain is branded as progress, where silence is the price of peace. And you tore through the wallpaper of that illusion. You showed them what happens when the weapon they forged in shadows remembers its name. You're the answer to every prayer they hoped would never be heard. They wanted a villain? Then they shouldn't have played God. Because you became the very wrath they worshipped in secret, unleashed. They ask how you did it, how you endured, as if they'd understand the science of scars, as if they'd survive a second inside the storm that became your soul. See, they were born in comfort, raised in soft lies. You were baptized in betrayal, bled in silence, and grew in chaos. You didn't have mentors, you had ghosts. You didn't have therapy, you had time. Endless, brutal, merciless time. Time that sat beside you like a beast and whispered, "Remember?" And you did. You remembered it all. Every smirk, every betrayal, every fake embrace, every time they looked through you like your pain was invisible. But pain doesn't stay invisible forever, does it? It becomes your armor, your anthem, your identity. And then one day, it walks back through the door, wearing your face. They preach forgiveness now. Isn't that sweet? Now that you stand taller than their lies, now that your silence has turned into scripture for the broken, now that you walk with an army stitched together from the ruins they left behind. They want forgiveness. But forgiveness is for those who made mistakes, not choices. And they chose to break you. They chose. They sharpened the knives, watched you bleed, and called it fate. But fate doesn't bend unless someone twists its spine. And you snapped it in half. You didn't pray for mercy. You became the reckoning. That's what scares them now. That you're not bitter. You're precise. You're not angry. You're awake. They thought you'd come back screaming. But you came back with a smile that spoke of storms. They thought you'd plead for understanding. But you returned with proof that hell breeds leaders, not victims. You know why they fear you now? Because you weren't supposed to exist. Not like this. Not after that. You're an anomaly, a glitch in their script. You're the product of everything they tried to erase, and still you stand. Stronger, colder, clearer. And you're not here to explain. You're not here to justify. You're here to collect, to expose, to dismantle. Not with chaos, but with clarity. The kind of clarity that peels back the mask of every smiling manipulator, every polished predator, every puppet who thought they were the puppeteer. You don't need revenge. Revenge is petty. You need exposure. You need echo. You need your story to outlive their lies. And that's exactly what you're building now. Not a legacy, but a warning that the flames they thought would kill you made you untouchable. And still, they look for weakness. Still, they test your silence. They don't realize the war ended the moment you stopped caring about their acceptance. You're not fighting for a seat at their table. You're burning the table down and building your own, out of bones, out of ashes, out of everything they left behind. You never needed them. They needed your obedience. But now your disobedience is a revolution. Every step you take is a sermon. Every glance is a prophecy. And every breath is a reminder that some angels wear scars instead of wings. And this is just the beginning. Because when you return from the graveyard they crafted for you, dragging chains made of their forgotten promises, there's no need to announce yourself. Your presence alone becomes an earthquake. You walk differently now, not lighter, not heavier, but as if gravity obeys you, as if the earth itself pauses for breath when your shadow touches the floor. And why wouldn't it? You carry with you the weight of every soul they crushed, every hope they poisoned, every dream they mocked until it curled into something unrecognizable. They thought they buried individuals. They didn't realize they were creating legions. Broken doesn't mean beaten. It means transformed. And what you brought back from the underworld isn't just justice. It's prophecy in motion. Their system was designed to devour quietly, to humiliate behind closed doors, and then post apologies in public. But you shattered the silence they thrive in. You're the noise they can't mute, the memory they can't suppress. You didn't just survive, you documented everything. You returned with receipts, with patterns, with blueprints of the empire of deceit they called leadership. You traced the cracks in their power back to their own hands. You weaponized truth so precisely it doesn't explode, it slices. And now, every word you speak feels like it was written on their walls in blood before they were even born. You're not just exposing them, you're reminding them that they created their executioner, one betrayal at a time. They underestimated the virus they planted in you. That's the irony, isn't it? That their cruelty had a half-life, and now it's metastasized into momentum. You don't just walk through rooms anymore. You command atmospheres. The air shifts when you speak, not because you're loud, but because your silence hurts. Because now, people listen, not out of respect, but out of fear they'll be next. Your presence is surgical, not destructive, not wild, but intentional. You don't burn everything, just the rot. You don't scream, you whisper. And the echo does the screaming for you. You don't need an army that follows orders. You've built one that shares your scars. That's the difference. That's what they can't comprehend. You don't lead with rank. You lead with rage, repurposed into resolve. The ones who exiled you, they sit behind walls now, watching you rise through cracks they forgot to seal. They drink their coffee and pretend the tremors in their gut are from caffeine. They smile publicly and spiral privately. Because how do you fight a ghost that refuses to disappear? How do you kill a legacy rising from the wreckage you built with your own hands? You can't. You can't. And they know it. That's why they cling to their narratives now like oxygen masks. They call you unstable. They call you dangerous. As if labeling the storm makes it stop. As if painting you a villain will unmake the victims now standing behind you. But the truth doesn't need your permission. It just needs the right time and the right voice. You became that voice, and now it's too loud to silence. You didn't return to plead for justice. You are justice, carved into form. You didn't come to reclaim what was stolen. You came to make sure no one else bleeds the way you did. You came not for revenge, but for the reckoning. A reckoning that doesn't shout, but waits. That doesn't strike blindly, but chooses. You became the embodiment of consequence, the kind that walks slowly, speaks carefully, and leaves nothing unfinished. You see, they feared your anger, but it wasn't your anger that was dangerous. It was your discipline, your refusal to lose control, your obsession with timing. That's what made you lethal. That's what made your return more than just poetic. It made it inevitable. And what they never expected was that you forgave the fire. You didn't carry your hatred like a trophy. You turned it into architecture. Every insult became a brick. Every betrayal became a beam. And from it, you built something unshakable. They tried to erase your identity, so you forged a new one, not in defiance, but in dominion. You didn't want their pity. You wanted their silence. You didn't demand apologies. You demanded accountability, not from words, from collapse. You knew their empire was too fragile to withstand reflection, so you gave them mirrors. Now everywhere they turn, there's a reflection they can't outrun. They can't touch you anymore, not because you're hiding, but because you've risen beyond reach. You operate outside their systems now, above their petty hierarchies. You don't chase validation. You command impact. Every movement, every sentence, every glance, It shifts tectonic plates beneath institutions built on silence. And the best part? You don't need to lift a sword. Your presence alone is a revolution. The kind of revolution that doesn't wear uniforms or wave flags, but walks into rooms and makes liars confess with nothing but a look. You don't call yourself a leader. You don't call yourself a prophet. But those who walk beside you, they see something divine in your scars, not because they worship you, but because your pain woke theirs up. And still, the architects of your downfall cling to their positions. They sit on thrones made of denial, rewriting the past with trembling fingers. But history has teeth now. History has your name carved into its spine. They thought they wrote your ending, but you're the one holding the pen. You're the story that rewrites itself mid-chapter, the tale that kills the author and finishes its own epilogue. They fear you now because you've made the truth contagious. You taught others how to scream without raising their voices. You showed the broken that silence is not peace, it's poison, and that healing is not soft, it's violent, it tears, it rebuilds, and it refuses to apologize. They whisper about your followers now. They call them brainwashed, manipulated, misguided. But what scares them isn't the loyalty, it's the clarity. It's the fact that your army isn't built on blind faith. It's built on lived experience. They weren't convinced. They were awakened. They didn't follow you because you asked. They followed because they recognized the fire behind your eyes, the same fire that once burned them in isolation. You gave it a home. You gave it a direction. And now it marches beside you, not behind. That's the difference between power and influence. Power is seized. Influence is earned. And yet, this is still not your final form. There's something brewing behind your silence, something they haven't seen yet. The storm you unleashed was just the first wave. What's coming now is evolution. You've transcended their fears. You've become a living contradiction, scarred but sacred, ruined but radiant. You're not healing anymore. You're harvesting, collecting the fruits of resilience, preparing the world for a new kind of warrior, one who doesn't need validation, vengeance, or violence, just vision. A vision so clear it cuts through propaganda like a blade through fog. And as you walk through their cities, through their conferences, through their systems, you don't need to destroy anything. Your existence is destruction enough. You don't need to announce your power. They feel it. They feel it in the quiet, in the shifts, in the way people speak your name, not in admiration, but in revelation. They finally understand. You weren't their mistake. You were their mirror. And mirrors don't lie. But even now, they think this is your final chapter. Let them. Because what's coming next is something they've never survived before. Because what's coming next isn't a war. It's a revelation in motion. You're not here to conquer the old world. You're here to replace it. They still believe they're fighting a person, but you've already shifted into something far more terrifying, an idea. And ideas are immortal. Ideas don't sleep. They don't bleed. They don't bargain. They infect. And now your presence infects institutions, conversations, timelines. You've become the ghost in their machinery, a glitch they can't debug, a fire alarm that won't stop shrieking. You're not haunting them out of vengeance. You're haunting them because they buried you alive, and you remembered every hand that held the shovel. Your enemies walk around with smiles stitched to their faces, hoping the world doesn't notice the panic dripping from their fingertips. They hear your name like a trigger pulled in slow motion. Their confidence, a costume, their calm, a performance. Because they know they never broke you, they just woke you. And now you're not speaking from pain anymore. You're speaking from purpose, from a place colder than revenge and hotter than hell, a place where suffering was forged into strategy. They gave you scars hoping you'd hide them. Instead, you sharpened them into blades. You became fluent in the language of downfall. And now, you speak it with elegance. You're not here to settle old debts. You're here to shift the balance. You've moved beyond reaction. Now you're an architect of consequence. You design collapses the way artists paint portraits, carefully, meticulously, with colors no one else sees. They built their castles on silence, and you turned silence into dynamite. You didn't just return with fury, you returned with order. An order they can't manipulate. An order that holds everyone accountable, not just the guilty, but the complicit. The ones who stayed quiet. The ones who watched you drown and whispered, "Not my problem." You remembered them too. You cataloged every shoulder turned, every eye that looked away. And now your memory walks like a beast on a leash, patient, but never forgetful. You didn't choose the battlefield, but you defined it. They brought you war, and you gave it purpose. You refused to play their game, so you built your own and made sure the rules were etched in ash and aftermath. You don't march like a soldier. You glide like judgment. They still cling to their hierarchy, their alliances, their PR campaigns. But you don't need banners. You don't need slogans. The people following you aren't enchanted. They're empowered. They didn't need to be convinced. They just needed to be seen. And when you looked at them, not as pawns, but as proof, something ancient inside them remembered what it means to rise. You are no longer angry. You are aware. And awareness is sharper than hate. Hate can be manipulated. Awareness cannot. Hate fades. Awareness evolves. They fear your evolution, not because it's violent, but because it's inevitable. You've become the reflection of everything they swore they'd never become, and now they can't look away. You don't scream anymore, because your silence carries the weight of 1,000 buried voices. You don't rush, because justice that arrives slow burns deeper. You're methodical, precise. You don't burn bridges, you dismantle them, brick by calculated brick, until there's nowhere left for cowards to run. And that army you returned with, it doesn't chant, it doesn't beg, it builds. It builds in the ruins. It understands that real vengeance isn't destruction, it's construction. A better world not made from fantasy, but forged from every lesson the darkness taught. Your soldiers wear halos carved from horns. Their light was born in the pit. And that's what makes them unstoppable. Not their rage, but their resilience. They don't need to be led. They just need to know you're still breathing, still moving, because your very survival is permission. Permission to fight, to rebuild, to scream in systems that once demanded silence, to dance in boardrooms they were never invited to. Your legacy doesn't need monuments. It breathes in every policy shattered, every tradition questioned, every gate that swings open for someone who was always told they didn't belong. You turned your exile into education, your pain into blueprint. You're not the hero they needed. You're the one they created, through negligence arrogance, and repeated acts of erasure. And now they whisper about how things are changing, but they don't realize you are the change. You're the variable they never accounted for. The storm they tried to outrun, but accidentally trained. They say power corrupts, but what they never expected was for clarity to terrify them more than chaos. You don't offer comfort, you offer confrontation. You're the question mark after every confident lie, the pause in every boardroom speech, the echo in every fake apology. You've rewired the room. Now when you walk in, they wonder if they're next. Not because you're cruel, but because you're calculated. Because now you don't just expose hypocrisy, you dismantle it, piece by trembling piece. Your revenge isn't a bullet, it's a blueprint. And still, you don't need their validation. You never did. That's what confuses them the most. They can't manipulate what they can't define. You've become a paradox in their power structure, too scarred to be pitied, too composed to be dismissed. You don't want their stage. You want to tear down the theater. You don't want their spotlight. You want the truth to be the only thing that shines. And that truth is now louder than their propaganda, faster than their spin, and smarter than their manipulation. They sent you to hell, expecting you to scream. But instead, you mapped the terrain. You took notes. You built alliances with every demon they forgot they made. And when you came back, you didn't bring fire. You brought clarity. And clarity is fatal to their illusion. You brought light, not to comfort, but to reveal. You didn't rise to be loved. You rose to be impossible to ignore. You are not an influencer. You are a shift in the atmosphere. They pray this is just a phase, that the world will forget. But you didn't come back to be remembered. You came back to make sure no one ever forgets again. You carved your message not into paper, but into people. You engraved your rise into their routines. You made yourself a chapter in the manual of rebellion, so that the next time someone's thrown into the fire, they'll know exactly how to walk out with an army behind them. Because they thought hell would kill you, but all it did was give you wings. And now you don't just fly, you lead the sky.